Hello and welcome. I'm Sean Black. We are in Norse Pagan Shaman. We are in Udazeta. And today we're going to be discussing awareness. So let's jump right into it. Awareness is probably the most ancient form of meditation that maybe we as humans engaged in. And we also share this with other sentient beings that rely on their awareness for survival for a variety of different reasons, both predators and prey. And it's just really, really basic and simple. And we're going to start with the physicalities. We're going to break down awareness meditation into the body, mind, and the spirit, or the body, the physical senses, the mind, the mentalism of how we perceive the way that we perceive, the way that we think about that, and how that shapes our construct of reality. And then also sort of addressing the operating system, if you will, that we use to integrate all the information that comes in from our senses. And then the last part, the spirit, we're going to talk a little bit about energetic awareness, subtleties, understanding how to sort of a little bit more advanced stuff about working with your consciousness and perceiving those energies, and it all falls under awareness. So let's get into it, shall we? All right. So everybody kind of engages in a light version of this to some degree. Now, the more distractions and sensory pollution that we experience, particularly like if you live in a city, the more of those things we experience, the more limited our scope of awareness is. And that's kind of a problem, and we're going to address that by some practice. But the simple version of the physical part of, or the body's part of awareness meditation is going to be to go outside somewhere if you can. And if you live in a city, it still works. It's the same kind of thing, and you'll figure out ways to make all this work. But go outside, sit down, shut up, and listen. Okay? And that's kind of how it works. But we're not just listening with our ears. We're also paying attention with our eyes. We're using our senses of smell. We're engaging all of our senses, okay? And it's important to spend a little time focusing your attention on each one of your sensory inputs that you have at your disposal. Now, obviously, some people will have, everybody's going to start off with sort of a different, it's like the volume knob is turned to a certain height on all of these senses, okay? And what we're going to try to do is go in and pay a little bit more attention to the most simple versions of these things. So when you go out and sit down someplace, preferably after one of your breathing sessions, okay? You're going to go out and sit down and start absorbing, Now, when I was in the military, we would do these things, especially like in infantry training, we would do LPOPs, listening post, observation post. And that's where you basically go out into the woods or on a hill somewhere where you can overlook something. And you dig in a little bit, and once you get all sort of camouflaged and stuff, then you set in and you start paying attention to what's going on around you very, very closely, right? And for most of us, something like that, or going out to a tree stand or something like that as a hunter, or maybe, it could be even something as simple as going out someplace where you're feeding and watching the ducks at a pond in a local park, or anything like that. These are all really good examples of this kind of thing. We're going to take it to a little bit more, we're going to bring in a little bit more focus. Now, while you're actually engaging in the awareness meditation in the physical part, you're going to be, vagus nerve breathing technique is going to be really useful here. If you're adjusting to the elements, in other words, if it's cold out or if it's, really windy or whatever, you've got some kind of distraction out there, then you're going to engage in box breathing for a little bit first and then go into the vagus nerve breathing. So the vagus nerve breathing sort of gets your head out of your thoughts a little bit, and they help because you don't want to be thinking about too much here. You want to be, at this point, you will have been doing your discipline meditation for a while, and you should have quite a bit of control over the thoughts that you choose to entertain. So that shouldn't be an issue. If it is, do a discipline meditation first and then go do your awareness meditation, and you'll find that you'll have better results. So you go out, and find yourself a comfortable place to relax. I like, the backyard is fine for me. I've got a river back there. I got all kinds of stuff. As long as the yard haters aren't out there doing their thing, everything's usually pretty cool. And if they are, I'll go somewhere else. But the more quiet the place is, the more you're going to be able to take advantage of the different senses. You'll be able to take advantage of them more because you're going out there in something that you already perceive as fairly quiet. Then you can sit down and really dig into listening to the orchestra that's going on around you that you probably weren't necessarily aware of at the time you walked up on that place. You won't always have ideal circumstances to work with, and you'll figure out ways to work around that, and that's just fine. But ideally, go out into a wooded area or some kind of a natural semi-wilderness area. You're going to get your best results in the beginning, at least from those areas. Now, if you live in the city, you can do the same thing. You're just going to think of all of the people and cars and all that stuff that's moving around. You're going to just think of those as like animals, okay? You want to try to sort of disengage from empathic association with any of the things around you to a degree. So you go out, sit down, relax, and then start turning up the volume on all your senses. Most of us are oversensitized or desensitized to a degree on the visual part. So, in a lot of places, and that's part of why I describe this as go out, sit down, shut up, and listen, instead of go out, sit down, shut up, and watch, because generally humans of our era are overstimulated visually. We've got computers and cell phones, and when we're driving, we can't really hear much about what's going on around us, and we're less exposed. But if you ride a motorcycle, you got a better. If you ride a motorcycle a lot, you'll understand clearly what I'm talking about. Or if you can imagine what it's like to do that, you'll understand more. You're less sheltered from the various influences that you'll experience, or the ways of drawing in information. And that's what this is all about. Now, when you go out there, some examples of some of the things you can do by way of maybe isolating your attention on one sense or another will be very, very helpful. Like maybe you go down and you sit down, you go out and you sit down and you just look around and perhaps you'll divide the 360 degrees around you into sections or something like that, and focus your attention on specific things. You might focus your attention on things that are very, very close, and then things that are further away to see what the outside edge of your sphere of awareness might be. And that's really important because you'll be able to go into an evaluation of what that sphere of awareness is, and you'll be able to recognize how it improves over time. Like, you can see what you can see and what you can tell about what you can see around you. Now, one of the most important things that, this is a really ancient concept, but it's a very important concept for awareness meditation, is that by naming things, we sort of bring them into existence, okay? Now, this is very important because when you begin to understand that you have 15 different kinds of grass in front of you, or 12 different kinds of trees, or maybe the area you picked, you've got 4 or 5 or 10 different kinds of birds. Giving a name to each one of those things is an important thing, and that applies more to the mentalism, and we'll get into that in more detail, but recognizing and separating differences is how we train our brain to sort of be able to draw in more information. So understanding the differences between the way things look around you, like I mentioned before, different kinds of grass, or, different activities that are going on with the birds, or different kinds of birds, that's important. But then also, you'll begin to, once you have a name for each one of these things and you understand what they're called, even if you just give them your own names, that's probably just fine. But it might suit your purposes better in the long run to know what everybody else calls these things too, like an elm tree or an oak tree, or Johnson grass, or some kind of wild marsh grass, or whatever you're looking at. Take a little time as you begin to do these meditations to go and learn about what those things are that are in that area. Go take a closer look. Now, the seated, relaxed awareness meditation, just in general, you can do it from a seated position, of course. But you can also turn a short walk in the woods or a short walk in the park or a short walk anywhere. That can be an awareness meditation. Driving around or riding your motorcycle, that can also be an awareness meditation. As a matter of fact, riding your bike should definitely be an awareness meditation, whether it's a motorcycle or a bicycle, either one. So going back to your senses, divide each of your senses up. Your sense of smell, your eyesight, your sense of touch, how things feel, how the ground feels, how the air feels moving over you. These are all really, really important things. So to that extent, you don't want to you want to do things that do not shelter you from them. Let me explain. Like, you're sitting out there and it might be cold. If you put a hood up, okay, over you, you've blocked out a lot of your hearing. You might choose a type of clothing that is a little different, like a hat that doesn't cover your ears to keep you warm or something like that. So be thinking about things that you can do to keep you less obstructed from the environment around you and more part of it, okay? But divide your senses up and focus your attention on each one of those senses. Now, in the written material associated with this, I talk about transducers and sensors, and how the transducer is your skin or your sense of smell, your olfactory cells and the olfactory nervous setup that's in your nose, your eyesight. These are transducers. They are things that take information or stimulus from the world around you and convert them into electrical impulses, okay? Those electrical impulses go through your nervous system to your central nervous system, and from there into your brain, into the proper section of your brain, which handles transferring or translating those impulses into something that that can be broadcast to your consciousness, okay? Notice I use the word broadcast because your consciousness does not live within your brain, all right? But your brain is the antenna that transmits back and forth to your consciousness. And awareness is about consciousness, not about the brain. However, we'll go into the mental state now, which is what we're doing here, is teaching the brain as an antenna, as a piece of equipment, teaching the brain how to better process, more accurately process the information from the outside world. Now, your brain is the sensor, okay? And it is what compiles the information and then transmits it to your consciousness, wherever that is. In unified field theory, it's everything around you. Okay, so the consciousness is where we're transmitting these worldly experiences into the consciousness so that it can absorb them and learn from them. Now, on the mind or the mental part, we're talking about how we perceive things and like the operating system of the brain and how it and the transmitter, how it works as an antenna to send out that information back and forth from the consciousness. So by separating each of your senses, separating your attention, or not your attention, focusing your attention on separate parts of your awareness, separate parts of your senses, what you're going to be able to do is challenge your brain to deal with more and more larger volumes of information. Okay, so this is also sometimes referred to as acuity. Okay, so you can actually increase your brain's ability to process information, so that when you when you open up your eyes and you're looking around at everything, you're able to process more information than you were before, and thereby remember it, okay? Because the memory is key to this. Without that, it's really hard to learn without memory, folks. So we're going to improve our processing ability here. So that brings us more into the operating system part of this, okay? And I've detailed most of this. I'm just covering some highlights in the video, but from the way that the brain works, what you will discover is that more and more information is easier to process, and you can remember more. Now, when I was in sniper school, we had a bunch of different little exercises that we would do for this. counting things, dividing things, and naming things is kind of really what it's all about, as far as improving your brain's ability to process more information. So you're going to challenge yourself to do that. From the sitting down in the woods perspective, for example, some of the things that you might challenge yourself to do is to determine the difference between the songs of different birds, and you be able to identify different birds by their song. Also, identify different activities using your eyesight and your sounds and your ears. Identify different activities that the birds are engaging in based on what their sound is. Now you do that by watching what they do and hearing what they're saying, right? And it's a comparison. So you see that when they're all huddled together in a certain kind of activity, they will sound a certain way. When a predator or a large creature moves into your field of awareness, you'll notice that the birds start acting a little bit different, okay? Now, these are all kind of basic things that were required for the survival of many different species, and we have become out of touch with a lot of that, but it wasn't always the case. These are things that our species used to be a lot more aware of. And so really we're just kind of waking up the brain. We're not even really teaching it new things with this stuff. Nothing in awareness is really teaching it new things. It's really just honing those older skills. So the first way that we're, in the mental part, the first way that we're changing the operating system a little bit is by challenging it to be able to process more information. And like any other organ, or any muscle really in your body, as you train with it, it will respond to that training. Now, from a physiological perspective, what's actually happening there is that you have neural pathways, new neural pathways that are going to begin to be formed. Now, we have set you up for success with this by teaching you the breathing exercises. And at this point, you should have been doing the breathing exercises for quite a few weeks. But what they do is they stimulate proper function of your body, which allows for proper neural development as you challenge your brain to do more for your consciousness. I hope that all made sense. So, adjusting that operating system. Some other exercises you can do. Let's say that you're not specifically in a meditation, but you want to do some of these exercises that will augment your meditative work. So walking through a parking lot, this is a shopping time of year, right? There's a lot of people out there. Instead of pulling up and finding the closest parking spot that you can find to whatever place you're about to walk into, find one that's a little further away, and as you're walking up to it, do a couple of things. Challenge yourself first to discover how many rows of parking there are in that particular parking lot, right? As you're walking up to the entrance to the place you're going to. Then you might challenge yourself further by identifying the number of cars that happen to be in the parking lot. Okay, you might first start doing it by estimating. You look at, say you got 15 rows of parking, and one row can hold 40 cars, and it looks like they're all about the same, and they've all got about 40 cars. Then you can figure 40 times 15 equals the number of cars you got there approximately, right? That's how you do these really quick, really snapshot kind of evaluations of the volume of traffic that you have outside. Now, the reason I'm using that as an example is because that's one that probably everybody has access to, but you can convert that into anything, anywhere, okay? The number of windows on a building, the number of entrances and exits, and all these kinds of things. Now, these are all kind of sort of military related, but they're also very, very simple. Now, when you go out into the woods, as you're walking, you might be walking down a trail and paying attention to just the number of oak trees, just the number of pine trees, or any kind of makeup like that. But get yourself in the habit of expecting more input, usable input from what's around you. This is how we stimulate the brain to begin to give us more, okay? And they're very, very important exercises. Now, there are a variety of different places where you can find great exercises like this or come up with your own. And I highly recommend that you start doing them. And, even even where I am now, even though I've been doing this for years, I still occasionally will come up with new ones. You know, instead of sitting in a car waiting, like if I'm waiting for somebody, instead of sitting in a car mindlessly fucking with my phone, I might be looking around and engaging in some of these exercises. Like, I don't know, maybe I'm a passenger and we're driving somewhere and I'm going to count the number of stop signs or the number of bridges or the number of red cars or the number of slug bugs, you know, whatever it might be. These are important things to do because you're stimulating your head and you're getting it involved in where you are in the now. And there are a ton of great reasons to do this. And I'm not going to blow it for you. You're going to discover these fantastic reasons for doing these kinds of things as you begin to do them. Your mental stimulation and acuity will begin to increase. The way you think about things will begin to change into a way that's a lot more useful for you in your exploration of your consciousness. It's really fascinating stuff. So, develop some tools, learn a couple online somewhere if you want to. Check out old sniper school books or some of those guys that talk about that kind of stuff. Those are all good skills. But challenge your brain to process more information from your environment. You might be sitting there fucking around on your phone and get your brain in the habit of looking up and looking around and paying attention and hearing what's going on around you instead of tunneling your vision into that one device that you might be dealing with, okay? Not doing this results in a degradation of mental capability and mental capacity. And, you might notice this with some of the young people that you encounter or work with sometimes, particularly like really young kids who spend a lot of time on these kinds of things. If you run into those kind of kids or you have those kind of kids, you'll notice a huge difference, and the difference can be so vast that it's frustrating. So bear that in mind. However, also bear in mind that the same thing is happening to us, all of us, and that these challenges are required for us to be able to develop the necessary processing capability of information and acuity and bandwidth between our brain as an antenna and our consciousness as what we refer to as ourselves or our understanding. So the importance of this can't be stressed enough. There's no way to stress it enough. But these are things that you don't have to sit down and do a meditation every single time. Doing the meditations, you're going to learn a lot, but using these little bitty exercises that just take a few seconds here and there throughout your day and getting in the habit of doing those things is really, really important. You will not be able to understand, witness, or perceive the more subtle energies that are out there that we have access to unless you have trained your brain to be able to process higher levels of information. Okay? So you might think that you're doing it, and you'll discover that you are maybe lying to yourself or making shit up in many cases. We don't want to do that. What we want to do is get the brain, get it back in gear. This is like starting at the beginning of a workout or going back to physical activity after a long period of time without it. It's the same kind of rules and concepts apply. So we're sending our brain to the gym or sending our brain to the to go for a run, that kind of stuff. It's the same kind of thing. So that's where we are on the mind part. Now on the spirit part, we're going to be getting into energetics, awareness, and more subtle energies, and we'll dive into that in a little bit. But regarding the mental part of this awareness, those are the things you want to think of. We covered the physical part. That's basically the five senses and probably the easiest, and we've had the most experience working with those. So develop those. Develop the basic part, the physical, the mental part, the mind. Now we'll talk a little bit about the spirit. So spirit or energetic awareness, right? Give yourself some time in exercise to do the physical with the five senses for a while. Give yourself some time to start working on those mental exercises for a while. And then, only then, I want you to start engaging with the more subtle energetic flows. And some examples can be a creek or something like that, recognizing the elemental energy that flows through them and how that works. Energy moves a lot like that. Energy moves like earth, wind, water, and fire and ether, okay, or spirit. Those are how you're going to experience, those are reflections of how you experience different kinds of energy that move through. So from a spirit perspective, a couple of exercises that you can engage in would be like going out and sitting in that place where you've been doing some of the body or physical exercises, and trying to perceive what else is going on with the birds, watching how they move, watching how the trees move and feeling how the trees move and sort of translating that. You might close off some of your senses to try to perceive some of these. You might try perceiving these energies with with all of your senses lit up. Exercises of different kinds of experimentation through here will help you start to become more aware of this more subtle energy, the life force energy of everything around you. You'll be surprised. You may feel it as waves flowing through. You may feel it or experience it as a lot like the way the wind blows and how energy moves. You can experience, if you're doing this with your eyes and all of your senses open, you can experience how the energy moves with the wind through a particular area, especially if there's not a lot of human interaction in there. You're sitting in the woods somewhere and you're sort of up on a hill perhaps, and you can feel the air coming from behind you and moving down a hill and through. And you can see how that energy, that wind, that air moving and that energy affects everything around. Other types of energy are much the same way. Other types of consciousness are even more so. And as you begin to practice these exercises that I've laid out, you will also begin to develop your own perception or own way of understanding these more subtle energies. And that's really the goal with the awareness meditation, is to begin to understand those. Now, another goal for the awareness meditation in general, with regard to mind, body, and spirit, is to be able to recognize, witness, and memorize what you experience, okay? Now, the memory part is very critical to what we're going to be getting into later with the Vey and the creative meditation. So, work your awareness. Develop for yourself some tasks that are required for you to go out there and learn and practice. Get your head wrapped around the microcosm and the macrocosm from the perspective of the body and the mind and the spirit. And of course, if you got any questions on any of that stuff, reach out to me. If you got specific questions, of course, I'll help you understand what I'm talking about. But get out there and get to it. Start figuring out how to integrate these things. Be mindful of your breathing while you're out there doing it. Be mindful of the now. Just keep your head where it's supposed to be. Don't worry about entertaining a whole bunch of things that are off topic. You're going to be entertaining some things with your brain, some thoughts with your brain that are different, of course, from the other meditations we're teaching. But what I want you to do is learn how to stay on point. Stay on point. Understand what you're out there to do. Do it. And if you don't have the opportunity to go out into the woods or whatever, do the best you can with your urban environment, or while you're driving, perhaps. Obviously, don't engage in the Wim Hof breathing method while you're driving or something like that. But you're free to experiment with that type of breathing while you're out doing awareness meditation too, and any other kind of breathing that you may have run across in your studies or in your research. So get out there and get after this awareness meditation. Reach out to me for any questions that you have, and walk with the ancestors.